The title of this particular sharing is called The Mountain of Diamonds. And I name it that because that's simply what I saw. And so I'll share little details of this. But it's very important that when it comes to dreams, God has a way to communicate things. And he does that in life, not just in dreams. He does it just in life circumstances and situations. And this dream reminded me like Moses. Remember when Moses, it says he turned aside to see why the bush didn't burn? Well, sometimes in life, God will allow some circumstance, some situation, something to happen that causes us to turn aside and see. And the Bible actually says that when Moses turned aside to see, that's when God spoke to him out of the burning bush. So many times in life, that when we have an encounter with God, it's when we get out of the norm, out of the ritual, out of the tradition. When we do something a little different, it seems to open up a door for God to be able to enter our world in a way and to reveal himself in a new way. And so I think that was the revelation with Moses, that it was when he saw the bush didn't burn and why that was. He had a question. He was inquiry, he questioned why this bush wasn't consumed even though it was on fire. And so it says when he turned aside to see, that the Lord spoke to him right out of the burning bush. So what a principle. The same with Jesus, when there's a man that he opened up the eyes of a man born blind. I think that was the same person, but I know one of the people that he opened up his eyes, it says he took him outside of the city gates before he opened up his eyes. And I was always kind of wondering why that was in there, and now it makes complete sense. If you're blind, you do everything by ritual, everything by patterns, by tradition. You don't change your pattern or your cycle. You do everything the same. And so it's like Jesus took him outside of his ritual, outside of the norm of his everyday life. He took him outside of the city gates where he couldn't be around what was familiar. And that's when he opened up his eyes so that he could see. So I think sometimes spiritually we're blind. The Bible says, in whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of those who do not believe. So there's a spiritual blindness, a spiritual dullness that comes upon us, just living in the flesh, living in this world. And sometimes we're just simply unable to perceive or understand spiritual matters. And I think that's where dreams and visions come in. That's phenomenal and fascinating, is that they open up our eyes. In fact, the book of Ephesians talks about the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that you may know what is the hope of his calling and the riches of his glory and his inheritance in the saints. So sometimes in life, we just can't see. And so God speaks sometimes in dreams or visions or revelations, or he unveils secrets and mysteries to us, just so we can really understand about his invisible kingdom, and it makes it more tangible, more real, more visible to us. Well, in this particular dream, I love geodes. Geodes are just cool because, like you're, walking around, all of a sudden you see this round rock, and it has the possibility that there's these crystals inside. And so it's always exciting for me if you find a geode that you try breaking it open and see if you find those beautiful crystals. Well, in this particular dream, I'm on a mountain trail, and I find, a geode. And I try to break it open, and I try to hit it against a harder rock on the ground. And every time I try to break it open, it goes further up this mountain trail. And I mean, it bounces and bounces and bounces, and just keeps bouncing up this trail. And I probably tried to break it open maybe 3 or 4 times, and I mean, it had traveled a long distance, and finally it actually got all the way to the top of the mountain, which I really was not planning on going that far. I was just, kind of like hiking, having a good time. But I end up on top of this mountain. When I get on top, I notice that there's these big boulders, and they're about maybe like square boulders, they're like about 4 foot by 4 foot, and they have names written on them, and they're in the midst of a bunch of trash that's on top of this mountain. Now, normally you don't see tops of mountains, but normally there's not trash on top of mountains, hopefully, and normally you don't see big blocks that are about 4 foot by 4 foot with names on them. So this was one of those kind of turn aside to see Moses type things. I knew it was something unusual. And remember, 2 of the names that I saw written on the blocks, one was Mary and one was Joseph, and they were actually touching each other. And I thought that was interesting that here, the Bible talks about Jesus and as a rejected stone, that he was the headstone of the corner, but he was rejected by the very builders. And that was a prophecy in Psalm 118 about the coming Messiah, that he was the headstone or the capstone, or he was the main rock for the building, the main chief cornerstone for the building. But it says the builders rejected him. So when you built a building, you had this cornerstone that was perfectly square, 90 degrees or whatever, and that was what you base all the rest of the building on. And the Bible says that the builders rejected the chief cornerstone. So it was a prophecy about Jesus. Anyways, so in this dream, Mary and Joseph are up on top of this mountain, written on these rocks. And you think about it, they were rejected pretty much in their day. Mary, they probably thought she was with an illegitimate child. Joseph probably was ostracized from his community, because here he agrees to marry, this woman, claiming that some angel actually came to him in a dream and said, even though she's pregnant, to go ahead and marry her, which he was originally thinking of actually putting her away and divorcing her according to the law of Moses. And yet he claims here he gets this dream and he changes his mind. Then all of a sudden, here Herod's out seeking the young child, and now they're fleeing into Egypt to get away, from Herod's murderous, rampage. So they were very much rejected. Well, here there's a bunch of rocks on top of a mountain, you know what I mean? And they're rejected. Well, as I'm looking at the scene, all of a sudden, just right behind me, a flicker of light takes place, and I look behind me, and I actually see inside this mountain there is a glass window, and that's where the light was coming from. And when I turned aside to see, I walked toward it, and I noticed that the light was coming from a diamond. This beautiful diamond was on there was a bench inside this window that was inside. There was like a room inside the side of the mountain, and this big 4x4 foot, stone, just like the ones that had Mary and Joseph written on it, was sitting on this bench. There was all these old-fashioned tools around it, and inside this rock was a diamond, and that was what was shining. And even the glass had like rock dust all over it. I had to actually wipe the dust off in order to be able to see. And I believe that was a revelation that God was giving me, that we are like those rocks. We have diamonds inside, and that diamond is Jesus Christ. The Bible says, Christ in you, the hope of glory. But the world has kind of like put us away, hid us away, out of sight, out of mind. We're in with the trash. And even though there's diamonds inside, the world can't tell the difference between us and the rest of the rocks out there. There might be square rocks, round rocks, just rocks, but we all look like rocks. But remember those geodes, the outside is a little bit different because of what is on the inside. And so the round rocks and the square rocks, I believe the round rocks had the crystal inside, those square rocks had a diamond inside. And I believe that what God was saying is that even though you've been rejected by men, see, the Bible talks about, I think it's in 2 Peter chapter 1, it talks about, that Jesus was rejected of men, that he was the chief cornerstone. And it says that we are now living stones, we're living sacrifices, we're like a spiritual temple of stones that are built up into a holy temple, making up the temple of God, the house of God, where he dwells. And so I believe that was a revelation I call the mountain of diamonds. I'm going to tell you that God does not look on the outside. God looks on the inside of the heart, and he sees that diamond inside. You may see yourself, and the world may see yourself a certain way, but God sees the truth. God looks at the inward part. God looks at the real you. And I want to encourage you that no matter what you're going through, no matter how you feel that you are, God sees your real intention. God sees your real desire. God sees that Christ in you, that desire in you that wants to be the best you can be. And so I want to encourage you that Jesus Christ is that rock. He is that the rock of all ages, and he's that diamond inside us. And if you just seek to know the Lord and get to know him and find out what he's put inside you, you got a diamond inside of you. And that Jesus Christ of Nazareth. That's why some people reject you and don't understand you, because you've got something different in you that makes your outside different. So you be encouraged that it's Christ in you, the hope of glory, and that God is for you, not against you. He loves you, and he has a great plan for your life. Hey, God bless you.